It's a great honor to be here. If there's something that I can't think of anything I care more about than economic growth and innovation. And what I want to talk about is economic benefits and jobs through entrepreneurship and technology. I've absolutely become convinced that there's a set of emerging new platforms in energy, in health, in computation, in transportation, that these platforms will be the platforms of growth economically for Germany, for our society as a whole, and literally will create the jobs of the future here in Germany and in the European Union and everywhere else. I wanted to start by talking just a minute about the Google view of innovation. When Google was started, the two founders didn't just do a search engine the way people normally did. They invented a different way of looking at links. And the original 10 blue links from 15 years ago served us very well. Around 2000, all of a sudden, the entire internet at the time became excited about a woman named Jennifer Lopez and a green dress she was wearing. And our programmers couldn't figure out how to use our algorithms to sort those answers. And so we invented a new product called Google Image Search, which you use today because of that need. Again, using different algorithms and a different approach. What was interesting to me is in each of these cases, you don't start with established wisdom, you start with a new idea. You have to start from first principles and build up. And that is the story of business and business innovation everywhere. Eventually, you get beaten by somebody who actually has a new model, has thought through a new way that you're going to put these things together. So along the way, in America, everyone assumes that everyone speaks English. But some of our engineers realized that we could build software, now called Google Translate, that would translate from any language to any other language without a dictionary. That product is called Google Translate, as I mentioned, and Google Translate goes from 80 languages and does not use a dictionary at all. It's amazing, again, thinking from first principles. We did the same thing with maps when we sat down and said, we have a problem. People are querying things here in Berlin and we can't find them. And so we built a maps infrastructure that is now #1 worldwide. So another problem happened. People began to move to mobile phones. And I don't know about you, but it's very hard for me to type on mobile phones. And so we invented a way of doing speech to the phone, so-called speech to text. And all of a sudden, especially if you have fat fingers like I do, you can use voice search. And it works. And I've always been shocked by that. How could it do it? And the answer technically, and a few years ago, we did a demonstration here in Berlin where we actually had someone speaking in English on one phone and hearing in German on a different phone, because we could do this translation that I'm describing. It's, from my perspective, magic. Technically, it's done with algorithms called machine learning and large data. But we're not done in these problems. I can go on and on about it, but let me give you an example of a query that we'd like to be able to answer. Show me flights under 500 euros for places where it's hot in December and I can snorkel. Pretty good, especially if you live in Europe or in the US. Why can't we answer that question today? After all, we know all the places, we know all the flights, we know about snorkeling. We haven't yet completely solved that question. But that's the question the person is asking. And we should be able to answer that in the right way. On and on. What we've tried to do is solve a problem in a new way. Another example. It's a great story to be a part of the developed world here in Europe and the United States and parts of Asia. The majority of people are not on the internet. Only 2.5 billion have access to the internet. Another 5 billion need to join. Many of them are in remote rural areas. So we built a balloon that literally goes up and down in height in order to move through the stratosphere, in order to provide telephony to very rural areas. Now you say, oh, it doesn't matter too much, they're poor anyway. It matters a lot, because that phone is their only connection to knowledge, to entertainment, to safety, to politics, to all the things that they want to do. So from my perspective, the principle is do something useful and everything else follows, including the revenue. So where are these bets, right? what are the interesting bets? I'll give you another example. One of our engineering teams, led by a medical doctor, decided that he could build the world's smallest battery inside of a contact lens with a computer, and he could test and change color based on your glucose state. More than half of the people in China are now pre-diabetic. I think Europeans are much healthier than Americans in this area, but I'm sure your fate is sealed by our bad diet importing to here in Germany. Americans will have the #1 health issue in America will be diabetes. So if you don't have it, you're going to know someone who needs this because it'll tell them what's going on inside of their body. It's extraordinary. And by the way, we licensed it to a European firm. What's interesting to me is that technological change here is not necessarily evolutionary, it's revolutionary. I'd like to talk about cars. This is a nation that loves cars more than anyone, and I certainly love cars. What's interesting about cars is that 1.2 million people die on the roads of the world every year. 1.2 million families and deaths that could be prevented. The US number is about 31,000 per year, which is the lowest number we've ever had due to the incredible safety advances, in many cases led by German companies, so thank you very much. Every one of those 31,000 is one death too many, one family, one burial, and so forth. That's not okay. And so when you think about it, why can't cars be driven by computers with people watching them? So I've, of course, been in the self-driving car, and I can tell you that it's very frightening. You get in there, and it actually is going at the full speed, on our case on the freeway. There's no speed limit here, but we have speed limits. And it follows too closely. I'm absolutely convinced. But it knows the distance, and off it goes. I'm convinced that 100 years from now, people here will go to the movies, they'll see some handsome young actor get behind this beautiful German car, open the door, and get in and start driving it, and they're going to giggle. And they're going to say, that's the funniest thing, that you'd let this actor drive a car, right? You'd let humans drive these things? There must be a different way, right? It's impossible for us to believe because we all love it, but in fact, the technology will ultimately be better. We're at a point now where computer vision is typically better than human vision. That face recognition, that number recognition, that all those kinds of things, that technology has actually gotten to the point where it's that much better. So when I think about this, as we do this, and I mentioned self-driving cars and so forth, and with many other things coming, I want to emphasize that we're doing this with partners. In our case, we're working with a whole infrastructure here in Germany, Roush, Continental, RCO, ZF, Link System, I can't pronounce it right, Bosch, Fremo, LG Electronics as a first example. With smart contact lenses, we're doing it with Novartis. With Loon, we're doing with the European telcos and with the European Space Agency called CNES. The fact of the matter is we can't do this ourselves. We can have these ideas, but the physical infrastructure, the knowledge, the training, and the testing is so extraordinarily difficult. So from my perspective, you do this in a partnership structure. We just unveiled something called Android Auto. We've been doing this for about a year. It includes, for example, Audi, Opel, Volkswagen, with something called the Open Automobile Alliance. What was interesting about this is by the end of this year, there are 35 different car models that are going to be using the software in them or one way or the other, accessing search and maps and music and information and safety and so forth. Audi, Volkswagen, and Opel have already announced upcoming models for this year and next year as an example. We did another interesting project. We did this with a company here called Infineon. We have one of the problems that you have with your phone is you're always typing on it and your fingers, again, are too big. So we invented technology which can watch what your hand is doing and figure out what you intended to do as you move your finger around right near the phone, right? It's a different way of controlling the phone. How did we do it? We did it with a German partner, again, over and over and over again. We've also done other things. We've tried to address the digital news issues in a partnership with a whole bunch of new news publishers, including FAZ and Die Zeit and so forth. To me, when I look at these partnership models, they're essential to what we do. So when I look at the model, the innovation model that we're driving, and I want to emphasize that this model, maybe I should start over and say, the richness in each of these industries is so large, it's the future for all of us. In transportation, it's not just self-driving cars, but it's automation and safety and connected driving and connected computing and so forth and so on. In transportation, it's also figuring out how to keep the cities not so crowded and figuring out a way to reduce the load, both the ecological load as well as the traffic load. In cities, it's a lot about helping people be safer and understand how they can, again, pollute less. In energy, it's about rebuilding the global energy infrastructure to be much more renewable focused. Germany, of course, is the world's leader in this and doing this with a number of German partners. In health, here's an example. You know you have a wow moment. Right? I remember when Google Earth first came out. My wow moment was I went to the top of Mount Everest in Google Earth, and I imagined myself at the top of the mountain, knowing that I will never get there except virtually. Here's another wow moment. There are doctors that are now doing heart surgery by projecting a hologram of a heart right above it so they can see the beating heart as they go in and they work on a human literally as their heart beats. That's a wow moment. I'll give you another wow moment. People are building retinal prostheses that allow blind people to see. My friend who has one said, "I can now see with my eyes closed." You want to understand the impact we have? That's it. That's why we do this stuff. So what I'd like to do is finish with an observation or two about public policy, leadership here, and so forth. Entrepreneurship, from my perspective, is the driver for innovation and growth everywhere. When you look at job studies and so forth, it's always the fast-growing, innovative companies that ultimately create jobs. We call them gazelles. Fast-growing, relatively new, sometimes owned by a family, sometimes as part of another company, sometimes venture-funded. There's every reason to believe, and I've spent the last few years here in Europe opening and investing in venture capital and innovative funds. Google has a huge venture capital arm which is trying to do this. Here in Berlin, we've partnered with a number of incubators and innovators. There's a lot of reasons to believe that Berlin, for many reasons, will be a source of great new job creation in this new emerging thing. All the people are coming here, they're excited, it has the right culture, the right coffee shops, the whole maneuver. The important thing is you need to protect this. You need to make sure that you understand it, that you care about it, that you nurture it. There are some other things that Europe needs to do. Can you imagine if we went back to 1986 and you had the kind of protectionism that existed before 1986 that made it so difficult for you to build products that would cross European boundaries? You did something called the Single European Act. There's now an opportunity over the next year in the European Union to create something called a true digital single market. And that digital single market is essential for operating within Europe. Europe as a unit is very strong because you have so many people. But unifying the 28 or so countries is fundamental to this. So consumer protection, so that people are protected no matter what they do, and shop and businesses and so forth. Intellectual property and copyright rules. Cross-border data flows are unavoidable. Okay, so you're going to have standard rules across how they work across the different countries within Europe. It makes perfect sense. When I think about public policy issues, it's education and education and education. Right? We're moving to the knowledge economy, and if you don't have knowledge workers, you're in trouble. Again, the educational systems are strong. But European universities, even in Germany, which is of course done very well, are underfunded in their research activities compared to, for example, the United States ones. So more money for education, more money for universities, more money for innovation, more money for research, goes on and on. And what's interesting is that this shortage, this job shortage, is fundamental. One of the more interesting statistics is from the EU, with 1 million ICT jobs going empty by 2020, and 43% of the jobs not filled. By the way, these numbers are similar to what we see in America and other countries. But I would say at the end of this, the most important thing is to understand that this is an enormously optimistic future for us. That the people here in other countries, trained in Germany, trained in European universities, inspired by what you do, are inventing a future that has more jobs, more creativity, more innovation, and it solves the real problems that we see today. That's why I'm here. I think that's why you all are here. I want to thank you for listening, and thank you for letting us get started with this incredible conference. So thank you very much.